Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Friday, October 4th, 2024. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today. President Biden says the U.S. and Israel are discussing strikes on Iran's oil sites. So President Biden said Thursday that the U.S. and Israel were discussing the possibility of striking Iran's oil facilities in retaliation for the Iranian missile barrage that targeted Israel on Tuesday, which was a response to multiple Israeli escalations. When asked by a reporter if he would support Israeli strikes on Iranian oil sites, Biden said, quote, "We're discussing that. I think that would be a little anyway," end quote. And that's basically all he said. So you can imagine it almost seemed like he wishes he did not say that they were discussing this idea. And this is an idea that is supported by Lindsey Graham, who, when you talk about hawks, he's, about as hawkish as you can get for an American politician, which is saying a lot. This is something he put out a statement after the Iranian missile barrage hit Israel. And he said, quote, "These oil refineries need to be hit and hit hard because that is the source of cash for the regime to perpetrate their terror," end quote. So Lindsey Graham might be getting what he wants here. A day earlier, Biden said that he would not support Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear sites, but the U.S. is vowing to ensure that Iran faces severe consequences. And basically what Israeli officials have told the media is that they're not considering hitting the nuclear sites as part of the first attack, but they expect Iran to hit back, and then anything's on the table. And keep in mind, Israel has nuclear weapons. Unlike Iran, Iran does not have nuclear weapons, but Israel does have nuclear weapons. So if Israel says anything's on the table, what does that mean? And just what we've seen, the barbarity that we've seen from Israel over the past year, it wouldn't surprise me if they used a nuclear weapon. I mean, and a lot of people in this country, I think, would cheer that. I'm not saying that I think that's what's going to happen. I'm just saying, if this thing really escalates, it is a possibility. It's something to keep in mind. It's something that a lot of people forget, that Israel actually has nukes. They're the only nuclear armed country in the Middle East. Turkey, if you consider that the Middle East, they do house U.S. nuclear weapons. All right. So where am I here in this story? So other options that Israel is considering is targeting Iran's air defenses or carrying out targeted assassinations inside Iran. And Israel's coordinating with the U.S., as we've been covering over the past couple days now. Apparently nothing's going to happen until they don't expect anything to happen this week. The Jewish holiday Rosh Hashanah ends on Friday night, and then it's possible that something happens after that, from some reports that I read in Israeli media. All right, so the next one here, Iran tells the U.S. that it does not want war, but self-restraint is over. So Al Jazeera reported on Thursday that Iran has delivered a message to the U.S. saying it does not want a regional war, but warning that its unilateral self-restraint is over. The message that was delivered through Qatar said that individual self-restraint does not secure Iran's national security requirements, basically saying that they're not going to hold back anymore. Iran also warned that if Israel launched an attack on Iran, it would be met with an unconventional response that would include the targeting of Israeli infrastructure. And we've seen them publicly say, there's going to be a crushing response if Israel attacks Iran. So this message comes as, all this talk about Israel preparing for an attack. And what I think kind of is being conveyed here is that after Israel killed Haniyeh, the Hamas political leader, after they killed him in Tehran while he was sleeping in a guest house that was guarded by the IRGC, the night of the Iranian president's inauguration. After they killed Haniyeh, Iran said they were going to respond, and then Pezeshkian, the president, said that they decided not to because the U.S. said it could disrupt ceasefire talks. So I think the message here is you're not going to be able to talk us out of anything this time. If Israel does hit us, they probably feel foolish for listening to the U.S. When all of these escalations happened since then. And it was very clear that Israel was not interested in a ceasefire. I mean, it's laughable at this point to think that they were interested in a ceasefire at any point. So I think that's really the message, is that they're saying we're going to respond right away. If Israel hits us, we're going to hit them right back. And then where do things go from there? And then, if Israel does think Iran's going to hit back really hard, that means that they might go for something really, for a really big attack just to begin with, just to get it done. All right. So the next story here, U.S. healthcare workers say that 118,000 people have been killed in Gaza. So 99 American healthcare workers who volunteered in Gaza over the past year published an open letter to President Biden and Vice President Harris on Thursday that detailed the horrors they witnessed and called for an end to U.S. military support for Israel. The healthcare workers said they believe the true death toll in Gaza is much higher than what Gaza's health ministry is reporting, estimating it to be over 118,908. So this letter reads, quote, "This letter and the appendix show probative evidence that the human toll in Gaza since October is far higher than is understood in the United States. It is likely that the death toll from this conflict is already greater than 118,908. So over 118,000, an astonishing 5.4% of Gaza's population," end quote. So the latest numbers from Gaza's health ministry put the death toll at 41,788. And we do know that that's an undercount. It doesn't count the people under the rubble. It only counts the bodies that are brought to morgues or hospitals. The American healthcare workers said that everyone in Gaza is either sick, injured, or both. They said, quote, "With only marginal exceptions, everyone in Gaza is sick, injured, or both. This includes every national aid worker, every international volunteer, and probably every Israeli hostage, every man, woman, and child," end quote. They said that almost every child under 5 they encountered, quote, "had both a cough and watery diarrhea," end quote. Each signatory to the letter saw wounds in children that showed they were being purposefully targeted by the Israeli military. The letter said, quote, "Specifically, every one of us who worked in an emergency, intensive care, or surgical setting treated preteen children who were shot in the head or chest on a regular or even a daily basis. It is impossible that such widespread shooting of young children throughout Gaza, sustained over the course of an entire year, is accidental or unknown to the highest Israeli civilian and military authorities," end quote. If this sounds familiar, it's because they sent a similar letter in July. That was about 41 healthcare workers who signed that. This is 99 who signed this one, and there's a lot more. This one's kind of expanded, and there's more details. There's some quotes here from some of these doctors, including Dr. Mark Perlmutter, and he's done a lot of interviews. He's an orthopedic and hand surgeon. He said, quote, "Gaza was the first time I held a baby's brains in my hand, the first of many," end quote. The healthcare workers said newborn babies were dying due to the conditions caused by the Israeli siege and attacks on hospitals. Asma Taha, a pediatric nurse practitioner, said, quote, "Every day I saw babies die. They had been born healthy. Their mothers were so malnourished that they could not breastfeed, and we lacked formula or clean water to feed them, so they starved," end quote. The healthcare workers said their Palestinian colleagues were targeted by Israeli forces and captured during Israeli raids on hospitals. The letter says, quote, "Many of these colleagues of ours were taken by Israel during the attacks. They told us all a slightly different version of the same story. In captivity, they were barely fed, continuously physically and psychologically abused, and finally dumped naked on the side of a road. Many told us they were subjected to mock executions and other forms of mistreatment and torture, end quote. So healthcare workers being abducted and tortured by Israeli forces. Israel claims that Hamas has used hospitals as command centers, but the letter said that none of its signatories saw any sign of militant activity. It says, quote, the 99 signatories to this letter spent a combined 254 weeks inside Gaza's largest hospitals and clinics. We wish to be absolutely clear. Not once did any of us see any type of Palestinian militant activity in any of Gaza's hospitals or other healthcare facilities, end quote. The letter concludes with a plea for Biden and Harris to end U.S. support for the genocidal war. It says, quote, every day that we continue supplying weapons and munitions to Israel is another day that women are shredded by our bombs and children are murdered with our bullets. President Biden and Vice President Harris, we urge you, end this madness now, end quote. So, I mean, the stuff that you hear from the doctors and nurses that volunteer in Gaza, as you just heard some of it, is the stuff of absolute horror. And they are basically the international journalists because Israel is not letting them, foreign journalists, into Gaza. So these are the only real reports that we get from people kind of from outside the country going in and coming back. And they are in the most, where you see the most horrors, in the hospitals. All the pictures and videos that I look through, the hospitals, it's just always, you see so many children every day being brought in dead or injured. And, the fact that this is so widespread, it's not just one story here, one story there. It's all of their experiences are the same, that children are getting shot in the head. Babies are dying that they shouldn't be dying. And there's no counting of that. I mean, the health ministry is not putting out a death toll of how many babies have been killed. As far as I know, have just died, like starved to death. We know they're gathering the names of the ones who were killed in airstrikes and stuff. But as far as I know, the people dying of malnutrition aren't really included in those numbers. So the fact that this is going on and just nobody seems to care about it anymore because an election is coming up, it's just completely despicable. And this is something the U.S. could stop anytime by cutting off Israel, ending the arms shipments, and it would end. All right, so the next one here, Israeli strikes in Gaza kill at least 99 Palestinians in 24 hours. So Gaza's health ministry said Thursday that Israeli forces killed 99 Palestinians in Gaza over the previous 24-hour period, bringing its death toll since October 7th to 41,788. Another 169 Palestinians were wounded, bringing the number of wounded to 96,794. I still think it's important to, even though, if those doctors are right and this is such a vast undercount, I still think it's important to just track this. It just gives us an idea of the violence each day. So this escalated. And if you remember yesterday, I went over how Israel escalated strikes on Wednesday. So these deaths, because it's a 24-hour death toll, that includes some of the deaths from the escalations on Wednesday. The Palestinian news agency Wafa reported that several Palestinians were killed on Thursday across Gaza. There was an Israeli attack on the Al-Shati refugee camp west of Gaza City, which killed 5. At least 2 Palestinians, including a child, were killed in an Israeli strike on the Nusayrat refugee camp in central Gaza. Israel launched heavy strikes on Gaza throughout the day on Wednesday, and Palestinian medics told Reuters that scores of people were killed in those attacks on the school and the orphanage in Gaza City. I don't think we know the final death toll from those attacks. So the violence in Gaza continues. You see this picture of one of the aftermaths of the airstrikes. All right, so the next one here, Israeli strike on West Bank's Tulkarem kills at least 18. So this article is from Al Jazeera. This is one of the deadliest Israeli airstrikes probably in 20 years in the West Bank. At least 18 people have been killed in an Israeli air attack on the Tulkarem refugee camp in the occupied West Bank. The Palestinian Ministry of Health said. The Israeli military said that its fighter jets had carried out the attack on Thursday in coordination with Israel's security service, Shin Bet. The army said in a later statement that it targeted the head of Hamas's infrastructure in Tulkarem. The Palestinian group did not immediately comment on the Israeli military's claim. A camp official, Faisal Salama, told the AFP news agency that the strike had been carried out with an F-16 fighter. Footage verified by Al Jazeera's Sanad fact-checking agency showed scenes of devastation in the camp, located northwest of Nablus in the north of the West Bank. The area was filled with massive piles of wreckage and fires had broken out. Rescuers could be seen rushing injured victims to receive medical care. This happened early Friday, so we don't really have many details about the breakdown here. So between October 7th and the end of September, 695 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank, according to a UN tally. So including these latest deaths, that would bring it over 700. All right, so the next one here, Israeli strikes in Lebanon kill 37 in 24 hours. I hope, this show doesn't seem too redundant because I'm always just kind of going over these death tolls. But, I mean, it's just there's so much going on. It's like hard to figure out if there's individual airstrikes I should cover, or I kind of have just been doing like the broad overview. So Israeli strikes in Lebanon killed at least 37 people on Thursday, the country's health ministry said early Friday, and 151 people were wounded. The World Health Organization said on Thursday that 28 healthcare workers had been killed over the past day as Israel is increasingly targeting medical facilities. The director of WHO said, quote, "Many health workers are not reporting to duty and fled the areas where they work due to bombardments," end quote. So one Israeli strike on Thursday targeted a building in central Beirut that was used by the Islamic Health Authority, which is a medical organization that's overseen by Hezbollah. So this is something a lot of people don't understand, is that Hezbollah, is not just a militant organization. There's also the political wing. They have seats in parliament. And there's also the social services wing of the party. They oversee all sorts of social services and hospitals and medical centers. They're kind of a state within a state in Lebanon. So this is, if you're a medic and you work for under one of these organizations, I guess that means you're a target, even if you're not, you've never been involved in the militant wing of Hezbollah. So a total of 9 people were killed in the strike, including 7 health authority workers. Lebanon's national news agency said that Israel used white phosphorus, which can burn flesh to the bone and is prohibited from use as a weapon under international law. So white phosphorus can be used, under international law as like a smokescreen or to illuminate something, but it cannot be used as a weapon. And we've seen lots of instances of Israel using it. This isn't confirmed that it was used in this strike. That's just what Lebanon's national news agency is reporting. And there are people saying that they smelt like sulfur at the scene, which is, I think, what white phosphorus smells like. So Lebanese Health Minister Faras Abiad said that Israeli strikes in Lebanon have hit 9 hospitals and 49 healthcare centers. So elsewhere in Lebanon, Israel ordered the evacuation of 20 more towns and villages and told residents to leave the southern Lebanese city of Nabatea, signaling the Israeli military will be expanding its assault on those areas. Al Jazeera reported that Israel has bombed one of the roads that is part of an evacuation route for Palestinians. Sorry, I got to fix that. I said it was an evacuation route for Palestinians, but we're talking about Lebanon here. I mean, it just sounds like such a familiar story. I guess that's why I wrote Palestinians there. But apparently they bombed this evacuation road 3 times. And early Friday, so kind of happening not long before I started recording this, really heavy airstrikes were reported in Beirut in the southern suburbs. Reports said that they were bigger than the massive strikes that killed Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah. And Israel dropped 80 of those 2,000-pound bombs when they killed him. So they're saying that these strikes are even bigger than that. So those threats that we saw from Israeli officials saying that they could turn Beirut into Gaza, that they could turn Lebanon into Gaza, they seem to be carrying that out. And ground fighting between Hezbollah and Israeli troops continued in southern Lebanon on Thursday. Another Israeli soldier was killed, bringing the confirmed IDF death toll in the ground fighting to 9. and Israeli troops also shot and killed a member of the Lebanese military. That's the first I've seen of actual, I know one or two other Lebanese soldiers, and we're talking about the national government soldiers, one or two of them were killed by Israeli airstrikes, but now one has been killed by IDF gunfire. So I think there's a chance here of the Lebanese military joining the fight on the ground. All right. So the next one here, U.S. citizens in Lebanon abandoned by the State Department. This article is from The Intercept. And basically, it's about, they start by describing one American who lived in Lebanon, and she describes her account of airstrikes being very close to her home, and then deciding that, you know what, I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to go to the U.S. I'm going to go back to the U.S. And she had trouble getting on a flight and called the State Department, and they basically said, you're on your own. There's 6,000 U.S. citizens in Lebanon who are trying to leave. The State Department chartered a flight for 100 of them, and they're telling everybody else basically that they're on their own. And if you remember, after October 7th in Israel, the U.S. was flying whoever wanted to leave Israel if they were American citizens back home. So these people feel like they're abandoned. Apparently in the 2006 war, the State Department was a much bigger help for Americans who wanted to leave Lebanon. All right, so the next one here, Israel strikes near a Russian airbase in Syria. So to recap here, we have the first story about threats of Israel bombing Iran. Then, of course, Israeli strikes in Gaza, Israeli strikes in the West Bank, Israeli strikes in Lebanon, and now Israeli strikes in Syria. And not just anywhere in Syria, near or at, it's not exactly clear. They struck near or close to a Russian military base in western Syria. This article is from Jason Ditz. So on Tuesday, an Iranian cargo plane arrived in Latakia with humanitarian aid for the hundreds of thousands of Lebanese fleeing the Israeli ground invasion. The aid was ultimately delivered to a warehouse in the city of Jabla near the Russian airbase in the region. Early Thursday, the warehouse became a primary target for Israeli strikes. I'm sure their claim is that the truck was carrying weapons or something, when dozens of missiles were fired at it and the area nearby. Russian air defenses were activated and reportedly knocked some of the missiles and drones down while others reached their targets. So based on the reports, it's not exactly clear, but it does seem like Russia actually activated its air defenses, because sometimes you'll see stories about Israeli strikes in Syria and it'll say Russian air defenses were activated, but they're Russian provided air defenses that they gave to Syria. Russia usually just doesn't do anything when Israel bombs Syria. The arrangement is don't touch our bases, obviously, or don't strike anywhere near our bases. As Jason says, Russia has long warned Israel to keep its air incursions out of western Syria, where its Russian assets are. So this is obviously another big risk of escalation here. Russia's rhetoric against Israel has really stepped up. They're saying Israel is entirely to blame for all the regional escalations, and now we see this. All right, so the next one here, new NATO chief visits Ukraine. So former Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte visited Ukraine on Thursday, just 2 days after replacing Jens Stoltenberg as the head of NATO, demonstrating the alliance's commitment to the proxy war. Rutte, and I think I got his name right this time, he said, quote, "This is now my 5th time in Ukraine since the full onslaught of Russia started in February 2022. But this is my very first time as NATO Secretary General, and it was important to me that I come to Ukraine at the start of my mandate," end quote. Rutte vowed he would work to support Ukraine's continued move closer to NATO and eventual membership in the alliance. He said, quote, "Ukraine is closer to NATO than ever before, and we will continue on this path until you become a member of our alliance. I very much look forward to that day," end quote. He made those comments alongside Zelensky. They had a nice big embrace when they met in Kiev. Rutte's visit comes as Ukraine continues to lose territory to Russian forces in Ukraine's eastern Donbass region. On Wednesday, Ukraine announced it was withdrawing from the strategic Donetsk town of Vuhledar, and Russian troops are closing in on Pokrovsk. And fighting is still raging in Russia's Kursk Oblast. It looks like it is going to take Russia a while to get the Ukrainian forces out of Kursk, but the invasion has failed to distract Russia from eastern Ukraine. And Russian forces, it looks like they're slowly pushing the Ukrainians back. Again, it's going to take a while, but it doesn't look like there's any threat of like a Ukrainian breakthrough there. So meanwhile, Zelensky is still pushing very hard for the U.S. to allow NATO missiles to be used in long-range strikes inside Russian territory, a step that would risk a direct NATO-Russia war and nuclear escalation. Zelensky said in his nightly address after meeting with the new NATO chief, quote, "The front line must be strengthened and long-range capabilities must finally be provided in the way necessary to end this war. Everyone in the alliance understands the needs," end quote. So last month, the U.S. appeared like they were ready to approve this decision on long-range strikes, but it looks like they backed down. Hopefully they backed down. They took Putin's warning seriously, and the fact that they're changing the nuclear doctrine as a warning, that's a very serious warning. So hopefully the U.S. and NATO take it seriously and they don't go through with this reckless escalation. All right, so the next one here, Assange was a political prisoner, Pace declares. So this article is from The Dissenter, Kevin Gostela's great website. So the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, or PACE, the abbreviation is PACE. I don't know if people call it PACE, but that's what I am calling it. They approved a resolution that states WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange was prosecuted and detained in the United Kingdom as a political prisoner. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce this Icelandic politician's name. She's an Icelandic parliamentarian who serves on the Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights. She drafted this resolution, which passed by a vote of 88 to 13. The resolution urged the United States to reform the Espionage Act and, quote, make its application conditional to the presence of a malicious intent to harm the national security of the United States or to aid a foreign power, and exclude the application of the Espionage Act to publishers, journalists, and whistleblowers, end quote, especially those who try to inform the public about war crimes, torture, and illegal surveillance. Assange, his wife Stella Assange, and WikiLeaks editor-in-chief were present for the debate and vote on the resolution. They cheered, clapped, and thanked the assembly. The debate and vote on the resolution came after Assange testified before PACE's Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights, and definitely go watch that speech if you haven't. We went over it the other day, but it was really great to see what he had to say. He said the only thing he pled guilty of was journalism, and that is absolutely true. So it's very good that he is free, even though, as he said, he didn't really get justice, but at least he got his freedom. All right, so the next one here, the UK gives Mauritius sovereignty over the Chagos Islands. So this article is from Al Jazeera. So the United Kingdom has announced it is giving up sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius in a deal that will secure the future of a key U.S. military base on the atoll of Diego Garcia, while allowing islanders displaced for the past 5 decades a right of return. The deal, announced jointly by the UK and Mauritius on Thursday, grants the latter full sovereignty over the remote archipelago, guaranteeing the operation of the United States base for the next 99 years. So the U.S. gets to keep its base in Diego Garcia, and this is the middle of the Indian Ocean. It's considered part of Africa. This was considered the UK's last African colony, the Chagos Islands, and the Chagosians, they were kicked out of their homes, I believe in the 1960s, so the US could build this military base, and the UK leased this island, Diego Garcia, to the US. And, this isn't, the people who are kicked off, a lot of them want to go back. As far as I understand it, they want to go back to Diego Garcia. There are other islands in the area that they're going to be able to go back to, but some of them did actually live on Diego Garcia, but they won't be able to go back. The U.S. gets to keep its military base. So the UK, which has controlled the region since 1814, detached the Chagos Islands in 1965 from Mauritius, a former colony that became independent 3 years later, to create the British Indian Ocean Territory. Oh, so it was in the 70s. In the early 1970s, it evicted about 1,500 residents to Mauritius and the Seychelles to make way for an airbase on the largest island, Diego Garcia, which it had leased to the U.S. in 1966 in return for a $14 million discount on Polaris missiles. So They wanted to get a nice deal on some missiles. To avoid breaching international law, the UK had labeled the Chagosians, whose ancestral links to the territory go back to the late 18th century. They labeled them as transient workers. And I think there was a UN Security Council resolution. Because the UK is on the UN Security Council. So it must have been a General Assembly resolution to that the UK wrongfully displaced the population and that they should let them go back. But the US base will stay. And I know some of the Chagosians aren't thrilled with the decision, but they're happy to be returning back there. And Mauritius said, their leader says that they're happy with it. All right, so that is it for the news for today. And Diego Garcia, there was what am I saying? There was black sites there, CIA black, torture sites on this base, and it does support. It's way out in the middle of the Indian Ocean, but it does support U.S. military operations in the Middle East. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. The one from Sam Bull: the U.S. rewards the UAE's bad behavior by making it a major defense partner. One from Judge Napolitano: Guantanamo, deal or no deal. One from Doug Bandow: what if there were Russian missiles in Canada? One from Brad Wolf: a ministry of risk in a time of war. And our spotlight from Fawaz A. Gurgis: risk of a new forever war. So please go check all that out. I want to mention again, the Expat Money Summit is starting on Monday. They've been sponsoring this show. And I wanted to show you the schedule here. So I am doing a VIP panel that's going to be, you're going to be able to watch that at 2 p.m. Eastern time. I'm doing it with Kyle Anzalone and Hirove Moric. World War III, Fear-Mongering or Genuine Concern, it's called. So for that, you need a VIP ticket, and there's 4 other VIP panels. And another perk that you get from the VIP ticket is that this is a long event, October 7th to the 11th, and you'll be able to replay, the ticket is free to watch everything else besides the VIP panel, but you won't be able to replay everything. If you get the VIP ticket, you'll be able to play all of the other parts of the conference whenever you feel like it. So if you want the VIP ticket, click the link in the description. You get a nice $100 discount, or you put in the code anti-war if you go through the website. If you want to get your free ticket for all the other, which is it's a ton of content, a lot of great speakers, go to expatmoneysummit.com to reserve your free ticket. So that's everything. If you want to support this show, tell your friends about antiwar.com, like, subscribe, all that stuff. It's very sad to think that Monday is October 7th, a year of this just horrific slaughter in Gaza. But anyway, this is the last show for the week. I'll see you in a few days. Thanks for listening.